Hello, welcome to a video where we take a look at writing an equation and then solving a scenario with it. So we have two different pay scales for a sales rep. The first one, pay scale 1, says they get a base salary of $10,000 plus commission of 8% of their yearly sales. The second pay scale says that we have a base salary of $13,000 and a 6% commission of their sales. The first thing that we're asked to do is to write a formula for each pay scale to define our variables and to use function notation. So in order to do that, I'm going to start out by letting P equal the pay, because I want to figure out the pay for the first one and the second scenario. So I'm going to use that in both. And then it tells me here that the commission is based on their sales, so I can see that that's another number that I'm going to need to use. So I'm going to say S is equal to sales. Now, as I understand this, a base salary means that you're going to get paid that amount no matter what a number of sales you make or dollars of product that you sell. And so in order to increase your salary above that base, you're going to have to sell things, and then you get commission on those sales. So sales need to be figured out before I can calculate your commission, and I need to know the commission to calculate your pay. So that means, to me, this first one is the sales is the input into this whole scenario, and the pay is going to be the output. Input is equal to my domain. Output is equal to my range. So as I start my formula, my pay is based on the sales made, so that's a function P of S. This is for pay scale 1, so I'm going to put a subscript 1. And they told us that that is where you get $10,000 plus 8%. I do have to change that percent to a decimal. So I'll take 8, divide by 100 on my calculator, 0.08, and then multiply that times the sales figure to calculate the pay. And then in similar manner, pay scale 2, based on the sales, starts with a base pay of $13,000, and then they get 6% commission, so I do have to change that to a decimal, so 6 divided by 100.06, and multiply that by the sales that were made. So the second bullet point asks us what amount of sales would result in the same income from the two different pay scales. So I'm generally thinking this is where when does the pay 1, which is that first formula, equal the pay from the second formula. So when are these two formulas equal? So that is asking me in general, doing some substitution, 10,000 plus 0.08 S. When does that equal 13,000 plus 0.06 S. And this is an equation that I can solve because I can see I can get my S terms together, my constant terms together. So we're just going to do that algebra here by hand and figure out the S, what sales would have these two be equal. So personally, I like to get my variables together first. So I'm going to end up subtracting 0.06s from both sides of the formula, matching this up to have like terms. And so on the left-hand side, I have 10,000 plus, when I did the math here, I got 0.02s equals 13,000. And these guys canceled out. Then I got my constant terms together, so I was subtracting 10,000 from both sides. Again, matching that up to where I have like terms on the left and the right of the equals. And so I have 0.02s equals 3,000. Yes, because these got canceled and I did the math on that side. And then my next step is to get s by itself, and since I've taken care of all of the addition and subtraction, this is the step where I want to divide, so I'll divide by 0.02 on both sides. And that gives me sales of 150,000. So that is the by hand algebra. And what amount of sales? $150,000 worth of sales would give you the same salary no matter which pay scale you were on. Our next one asks us to graph both functions in the same window, and then to find a window that shows your answer to the previous question. So I am going to be doing this on an online graphing calculator because that's what I have available to make the video. You're going to do this on your handheld graphing calculator, and I'll talk you through all the differences in the two calculators that we're using. So I think we can see this here. So on my calculator, first thing I have to do is type in the equations. Your calculator's the same. Your calculator, you're going to start with the y equals. So you get to push the y equals button, and your calculator will already say y equals. Mine, I have to type y equals. And then you're going to type the formula. So the first formula that we have is 10,000. Make sure I get enough zeros there, plus 0.08s. And I'm going to use x, and so are you. Then you're going to use your arrow key, go down to where it has y2. So I'm going down to my second equation. Your calculator already has y equals typed. I have to type that, and I'm going to type in my second formula. So 13,000 plus 0.06x. Now, for both of us, we're going to need to set up a window in order to see this graph. And so when we set up a window, we really have to think about what was our domain and our range. So on your calculator, you're going to push the window button, which is directly beside your y equals button, right below your screen. And it's going to prompt you for the x minimum and the x maximum as the first two items. So we noticed back here in our PowerPoint that our input or our domain was the sales. I noticed in my by hand math that we know the sales are equal at 150,000. I always want to set my window bigger than my answer so that I can fully see my answer. So I have to go into my settings here, but you have already at your window. So your x minimum, I set mine at 0 because I felt like it did not make sense to have negative sales. And then you have to set your x maximum. And I set mine at 200,000. Because I know the answer is 150,000, always want to go a little bigger so that the window that I have to view this answer is a little bit bigger. Then we have to set up our y. So on your calculator, the next thing is the x scale. I always let that at 1. And then I go down to where it's at y minimum. So the y values in this problem, if you remember up here, our output or domain, excuse me, output or range was the pay. And both of these different pay scales, the one starts at 10,000, the other starts at 13,000. So I could start at 10,000 as my minimum. I personally put that y minimum at 0 because, again, it does not make sense to have negative pay. And I thought I'd kind of like to see where those other numbers fall. So started at 0. And then I sure hope these people like annual salary, because it said yearly base salary is a lot more than 10 or 13,000. So this next number, I just kind of made an idea in my mind of what they might be making. So I put it at 50,000, and it worked. Wouldn't have even had to be that big because these people are not making a lot of money in this scenario. But we'll go with 50,000, and it's just like, that seems like a nice salary for the year. And so then you are going to hit the graph button, and I'm going to click out of this window, and you should see a very similar graph to what I'm seeing. So you should have two lines, and they should cross somewhere on your screen. Now, the answer or solution is where those 2 points, those 2 lines meet. So if I click on it here on my screen, I can see that 150,000, that was the answer, the sales when they're equal, and you can see that that would be a salary of 22,000 for either job. And we could find that point on our calculator, but that's not the purpose of this problem. And so then that really answered the question that we had, because our question was graph both, find a window that shows your answer. And so we really did that. So we had our window there from 0 to 200,000 in the X direction, 0 to 50,000 in the Y direction, and that was a window. It showed our answer here of where the two are equal. And so that question is complete. Our next question asks us, under what conditions should you choose each pay scale if you're going to be the sales rep? And so this is where, if you're interviewing for that job, you want to ask historically what has been the sales for this territory. And I can see here, mine's color, and this is where it's so nice if you have a color calculator, but you can figure it out if you don't. The green one is the lower one here up until where they're equal, and then the green line is higher. So if the historical sales for this position are less than 150,000, I would want to pick the purple line because that's the higher one. And if they're more than 150,000, then I would want to pick the green line because that's the higher salary. And I can tell from the way that we made our equations which one is more based on sales and which one is more based on the base pay. And so if we look at our two equations, pay scale 1, the base pay is low, but the percentage of commission is much higher. So I want to pick pay scale 1 if I'm going to sell more than $150,000 worth. Pay scale 2, you get more money for commission for the base and less for commission. So you want to pick pay scale 2 if the historical sales are less than 150,000. So we're going to try to write that in here so you have a concrete answer. What conditions? So if you sell less than 150,000, and that's dollars of sales. So that's where you want to rely, when you're less than, you want to rely on this base pay. So you want pay scale 2, pick pay 2. And then if there's more than 150,000 of sales historically for this territory, that's where you want that bigger commission, because you're doing more sales. That's what you're going to pick, pay 1. And so the graph really helps us see that, see which pay scale is higher in which time frame. So I hope that that helps you in sorting that out. We can solve it by hand, we can see it on the calculator, and then we can make a decision.